Hello, everyone. We are coming with the last Bible study in the Why We Need the Bible series. And today we're going to be looking at why we need the Bible and the Bible in the marketplace. And so to start things off here, I'll start let me see if I can get this working here. There we go. All right, so we are going to start with Genesis chapter 1, the beginning of all things. And we're going to read in starting in verse 28. And here we have, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for your food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the sixth day. So we're going to start with looking at work and careers and all of that by starting in Genesis 1, because really that's where it all started, basically. And these verses just kind of touch on it a little bit, but the whole picture is that God created Adam to work, to have a job, and to be a fulfilling member of society, because God made Adam, and right away he gave Adam a job. He brought all the animals to him to name, and that was before he even created Eve. And after he created Eve, he placed them in a garden, which by definition is a tended and cared for area. And so his job before the fall was going to be to care for this garden, to grow things, to tend it and take care of it. And so here we see the beginning of what God planned for us in our careers or our work life, and that is to work, basically. He wanted us to have a job and to be fulfilled, because that's a fulfilling part of humanity, is being able to do something that helps others or brings value. And so that's just the beginning of it right there in Genesis. And then we're going to jump over to Jeremiah 29, verses 4 through 7. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And I love this passage because we're looking at then kind of the biblical purpose of businesses. And really, it kind of goes back to Genesis and ties into. It's really what God created us for, and it's to bring value to those around us, and to meet the needs of other people. And in working in that community, we can have a better life, be more fulfilled, or work together to accomplish bigger things than we can individually. And so here we see in Jeremiah's time, he was prophesying right at the end of the kingdom of Israel, and it was just about to be overtaken by the Babylonians, and the Israelites deported to Babylon. And so this is a time of trauma and upheaval. The armies of Babylon were coming against their country and destroying it, taking people as basically slaves and marching them hundreds of miles away to a new land. So if you can imagine the trauma of all of that going on, it wasn't a peaceful time. It wasn't a relaxing time. And so when you have all of that, and then the message of God comes through that wherever, although God had, this penalty for their sin that they had to pay, but even through that, God wants to give them a message of hope. And this is found throughout the Old Testament, is that even though they pay for their sins, there's still a message of hope. God still wants good things for them, and he still has plans that are good for them if they'll listen and obey. And so here, even in exile, he's got a plan to prosper them and to kind of get them back into normal life again, even though it wouldn't be in their homeland. So I think that's just a great message for us even today, even when the times are chaotic and we don't see the answers or how it's going to end up. God still has this message of hope for us even today, in that he's got his hand on everything. He knows what's happening, and he will in the end win. And so he knows all those plans, and he wants to work it out for your good. So then we are going to take a look over in Proverbs chapter 11, verses 23 through 31. The desire of the righteous ends only in good, but the hope of the wicked only in wrath. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. People curse the one who hoards grain, but they pray God's blessing on the one who is willing to sell. Whoever seeks good finds favor, but evil comes to those who search for it. Those who trust in their riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf. Whoever brings ruin on their family will inherit only the wind. And the fool will be servant to the wise. But the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. If the righteous receive their due on earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner? All right, so in this, we're going to just look at how good is contrasted with evil, in that it should be apparent to those around us, in the marketplace, in the world, in our communities, that it should be obvious those who are righteous and those who are unrighteous, because of how things go for them. Obviously, it's not true in every single case, because in life things do happen. But generally, God's desire and purpose for us is to prosper, is to have favor, is to have life and prosperity and abundance, is his desire and plan for us. And so obviously in certain times, that doesn't happen when the nation is punished or certain things like that. There are times when it, may not apply as much, but his overall arching goal for us is to bless us. And so that is, and just touching there too, is the kind of the theme of generosity there. I just want to touch on that too. In that, generosity throughout the Bible is always spoken of positively and always spoken of as in bringing blessings. And we can see that even in our world around us. If there's a business that's generous and is giving to people and helps the community and, is willing to go out of their way to help those in need, you can feel there's a difference to that business, to those attitudes, rather than the stingy, we don't help anyone, our money is ours type of feeling. And so that generosity is very much encouraged in the Bible. And God asks us to be generous as the people of God, because he was generous to us first. With Jesus dying on the cross, that was a huge thing to give. And so because of that, it's our job then to take that generosity and to spread it to those around us, to make an impact and to make a difference in our communities and marketplaces. All right, and then our next verse we're going to look at is 2 Corinthians 9:8. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. in 2 Corinthians 9:8. So here we just see, again, touching on the generosity in that if we're open-handed to those around us and willing to share and willing to bless, God wants to pour out abundantly in our lives so that we can bless others. And it's commonly referred to as the principle of sowing and reaping in the Bible. Kind of what you do will come back to you, kind of a feeling. So that is encouraged. All right, and then we're going to return back to Proverbs and Proverbs chapter 11, chapter 21 and 22. We'll look at these verses here. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him, because his hands refuse to work. All day long he craves for more, but the righteous give without sparing. One who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. All right, so here, I'm just going to read out of our Sunday school book here. There are few places where the believer's ethics shine brighter than in the marketplace. The scriptures in this subpoint address three issues where ethics can be clearly displayed. Proverbs 11:1 offers practical application of the command to love one's neighbors as well as the stranger. In ancient times, it could be difficult to be precise in making weights used in business, thus creating opportunity for dishonesty and injustice. Today, such opportunities might take other forms, but they are just as real, such as selling something without revealing a problem. One might be able to conceal fraud from others, but the Lord sees all. Those who are honest, even in private, find favor with him. In Proverbs 21, interestingly enough, it links sloth and a lack of charity. The righteous possess wisdom, which helps them see the necessity of work. They also recognize that work comes with work comes prosperity, which allows them to give to those in need. In contrast, the slothful never have enough to be generous. They demonstrate their foolishness in their selfishness and lack of compassion. In Proverbs 22, it reminds us that unrighteousness can be seen in the way we treat the rich as well as the poor. Oppressing the poor for personal gain is often readily seen. However, currying favor with a rich person through self-serving flattery or favors is also wrong in God's eyes. Throughout Proverbs, we are reminded that injustice and dishonesty are used in the marketplace because they are effective in the temporal sense. Throughout history, many have gotten rich at the expense of the poor and the desperate. The issue is ultimately spiritual. Prosperity is not, for the Christian, a sign of God's blessing. It can come as a result of unrighteousness and with terrible consequences. We are wise to instead navigate the marketplace using scriptural principles of righteousness. So that's just a good reminder that God sees all and that our motives will be tested in the end times, or when we're at the judgment seat. So then the last point that we're going to look at is in James 5:1-4. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your field are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. So this passage is likely directed at unbelievers. The selfish rich men would be judged because they had stored up treasures for themselves. Unlike spiritual treasures, their wealth would not stand the test of time. Worldly treasure eventually rots or tarnishes, a testimony to the greed, selfishness, and lack of compassion within those that are devoted to hoarding it. In these last days, people ought to be devoted to laying up treasures in heaven. Yet these unbelievers instead focused on accumulating things that would not stand the test of time. Furthermore, the cries of the exploited also testified against these men. In Bible times, there were no labor laws. The wealthy could enrich themselves by treating their workers unfairly. The needy and the desperate had no recourse in such cases. The message of James 5 is twofold. The righteous are not focused on accumulating wealth for their own indulgence, but for godly purposes. And if they do obtain riches, it is through legitimate means with compassion for the vulnerable and needy. And as a side note, I just want to also say that in this passage, those that were wronged, that the Lord heard, and that their cries against their employers were heard by God, and that God was willing to take measures against them because of that. So just a reminder that God does hear us in unjust situations. So that is our lesson then here for today about the Bible in the marketplace. And I thank you for joining us, and have a great week.